5 years ago, I stood in the ashes of a life I thought I'd built forever. A life where every brick was laid with sweat and sacrifice, only to watch it crumble under the weight of rejection. My family, the people I loved most, turned their backs, not because I failed, but because I dared to choose a path they couldn't understand. I was a river, unmoored, drifting through a world that felt like it had no shore. But here's the truth I learned in the quiet of those lonely nights, the moment you're cast out. The moment you feel the ground give way beneath you. That's when you find your roots. Not the ones others planted for you, but the ones you grow yourself, deep and unyielding, anchoring you to a purpose stronger than their doubts. Today, I'm not here to tell you how to avoid the fall, because you will fall. I'm here to show you how to rise, how to build a life, a business, a legacy, brick by brick, from the ground up. This isn't about trophies or applause. It's about the quiet strength of knowing you didn't break, the kind of strength that turns a river into a mountain. Over the next hour, we'll walk this path together, from the pain of exile to the power of standing tall. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove yourself right. So, take a deep breath, and let's begin, because your story, the one you're writing right now, is worth every step. Number 1. Introduction: Why Building a Successful Business Matters. I remember the day I hit rock bottom. It was a cold, gray morning in November, the kind where the sky feels heavy and unforgiving. I had just been laid off from my job, and as I walked out of the office for the last time, the silence was louder than the words they didn't say. My relationship was crumbling, pieces slipping through my fingers like sand, and I had no idea what came next. I felt like a river, unmoored, drifting, rushing toward nowhere, but as I sat in my car, staring at the steering wheel, something stirred inside me. A quiet realization took root. I didn't have to be carried by the current. I could carve my own path, build something that was mine. That's when I decided to start my own business. Building a successful business isn't about chasing wealth or stacking titles. It's about following your heart, finding your true path, and creating a home for your dreams, a place where they can grow deep roots. It's the strength to stand firm when the ground shakes beneath you, the resilience to prove you won't break. When I took that first step, I didn't just find a paycheck, I found purpose, I found direction. I went from a river lost in the tide to a mountain, solid and steady, rising above the storm. Maybe you're there now, drifting, unsure, feeling the sting of rejection or the weight of a dream deferred. Maybe life has knocked you down, and you're wondering if you've got what it takes to get back up. I'm here to tell you this: building a successful business can be your anchor. It's not a quick fix or a fairy tale. It's hard, messy, real. But with grit and guidance, it can steady you. It can turn your pain into power, your loss into legacy. In this video, I'll share what I've learned from 20 years of building businesses falling, failing, and finding my way back. We'll walk the practical path together, crafting a plan, wrestling with finances, gathering a team. But more than that, we'll dig into the deeper journey, the one where you learn to trust your heart, embrace your truth, and build something lasting. Not for applause, not for revenge, but for you. So, if you're ready to stop drifting and start anchoring, to turn your fractures into foundations, let's take this step together. Number 2, crafting a business plan, your roadmap to success. Picture this: you're standing at the edge of a river, watching the water rush by, wild and untamed. That was me, Years ago, when I thought sheer willpower could carve my path, I had dreams big, blazing ones, but no map to guide me. I was a river without banks, spilling over, losing myself in the vastness of possibility. Then, the inevitable happened. I crashed. A project I'd poured my soul into fell apart, not because I lacked talent, but because I lacked direction. The rejection hit like a boulder, shattering my confidence, leaving me to gather the pieces in the quiet aftermath. I'd been so sure passion alone could carry me. But there I was, adrift, wondering who I even was without that dream. But here's what I learned in that silence. A business without a plan is like a river without banks. It floods, it destroys, it loses its way. I'd been flowing without purpose, and it cost me. That truth stung, but it also lit a spark. I needed banks to channel my flow, to turn my passion into power. So, I sat down, not with grand ideas, but with a simple notebook. I started sketching my roadmap, who I wanted to serve, how I'd reach them, what pitfalls to sidestep. It wasn't sexy or flashy, but it was solid. That plan became my anchor, holding me steady when the winds of doubt blew fierce. When I set sail again, this time with a map in hand, everything shifted. I wasn't drifting, I was navigating. My first success didn't feel like a trophy, it was a homecoming. I'd found my way back to myself, not by chance, but by choice. That's why crafting a business plan matters. It's not just a document, it's your compass, your anchor, your roots. It's the difference between being carried by the current and charting your own course. If you've ever felt like that river lost, overflowing, unsure of your path, know you're not alone. More importantly, know you have the strength to build your banks, to craft your roadmap, to find your way home. Let's take that step together. Number 3, financial mastery, managing money like a pro. Imagine this, I'm sitting alone one night, the glow of my laptop screen casting shadows across a room too quiet to feel like home. My bank account stares back at me, the numbers so low they feel like a personal betrayal. I'd thrown everything into my first business every late night, every wild hope believing passion alone could carry me through. But months later, there I was, a dream teetering on the edge, a balance that couldn't even cover rent. It wasn't just the money that hurt, it was the weight of failure pressing down, heavy as stone. I'd been a river, rushing forward with no banks to guide me, and I'd smashed against the rocks. That night, in the stillness, a truth sank in money isn't the villain I'd made it out to be. It's the anchor that holds you steady when the winds howl. I'd been chasing the stars, blind to the cracks in my own foundation. Facing that truth felt like standing before a cracked mirror, every flaw laid bare. But here's what I learned: money, like water, needs a channel. Let it run wild, and it drowns you. Shape its path, and it becomes life itself. So, I chose not to chase riches, but to master what I had. I started small, tracking every coin, cutting what drained me, pouring into what built me up. It wasn't pretty or grand, but it was real. Bit by bit, those numbers stopped mocking me and started working for me. I wasn't just counting cash. I was reclaiming my strength, laying bricks for a new beginning. When I stepped into my next venture, I didn't just have a dream, I had a lifeline. Every move was deliberate, every gamble weighed. Success didn't crash in like a wave. It grew, steady and sure, a stream that carved its own path. That's the quiet power of financial mastery. It's not about stacking gold or outrunning everyone else. It's about building a home for your dreams, a place where they can sink roots and stand tall. If you've ever felt like that river spilling over, unsure where you fit, know you're not alone in the current. You've got the heart to anchor yourself, to turn chaos into purpose. Let's walk that path together, step by step. Number 4, marketing magic, winning customers, and building a brand. I remember the day I launched my first product. I'd poured everything into it, late nights, wild hopes, doubts stitched into every seam. But when I set it free, it was like shouting into a void. Crickets. Not a single sale. I felt like a river without a current, stagnant, unseen. The rejection wasn't loud, it was silent, and that hurt more. I'd lost my way, my sense of self unraveling, a lighthouse with no light, wondering if anyone would ever find me. Then, in that quiet, I saw it. I wasn't speaking to anyone's heart because I hadn't shared mine. I'd hidden behind features, facts, afraid to show the real me. Marketing isn't about convincing, it's about inviting. It's not a billboard, it's a hand reaching out. So I started over. I told my story, the mess, the doubts, the dreams that kept me going. And something shifted. People didn't just buy, they connected. They saw themselves in my journey, and my brand became a home for their hopes. Here's the truth. Your brand isn't what you sell, it's what you stand for. It's the roots you plant, the anchor that holds steady. Build from your heart, and you don't just win customers, you build a family. That's the magic strangers turning into kin, one story at a time. If you felt unseen, unheard, know this: your story is your strength. Share it boldly, not to impress, but to connect. Let's make your marketing a beacon, guiding others home. Number 5, team building, assembling your dream team. Years ago, I stood alone, crushed under the weight of my own ambition. I was a writer with a fire in my gut, trying to juggle every role: scribe, editor, promoter, all at once. My desk was a battlefield, littered with half-finished drafts and cold coffee, the clock mocking me at 3 a.m. I was a river without banks, spilling everywhere, rushing nowhere. The isolation clawed at me, a heavy fog that dimmed my spark. I felt like a star torn from the sky, lost, fading, unseen. My words, once sharp, dulled under the strain. I was breaking, and I didn't even know it. Then, one sleepless night, a truth cut through the haze. I looked at the creators I admired, novelists, filmmakers, poets, and saw they weren't solitary giants. They had teams, hands and hearts that carried their vision forward. I'd been drifting, unmoored, when I was meant to anchor. The pain wasn't failure, it was a signal. I couldn't climb this mountain alone. I needed roots, a foundation, a tribe. So, I resolved to build my dream team. I didn't just hunt for skills. I sought souls who saw the same stars I did, passion over polish, heart over hustle. I found an editor whose pen sharpened my voice, a marketer who breathed life into my reach, a collaborator whose ideas lit fires I couldn't spark alone. It was messy, vulnerable work, trust always is, but step by step. I gathered my anchors. They weren't just help, they were home. And then, everything shifted. With my team beside me, my work didn't just grow, it soared. Words flowed truer, stories hit harder, views climbed higher. I was no longer a lone river. I was a mountain, rooted deep, unshaken by the winds that once battered me. My strength wasn't mine alone anymore, it was ours. Quiet pride replaced the old panic, not loud or brash, but steady, like a heartbeat. Together, We built something lasting, something real. You're here because you've felt that weight, too, the ache of going it alone. Maybe you're chasing a dream, building a business, or carving a path, and the load's too heavy. Hear this, you weren't meant to drift. You were born to rise, surrounded by a team that steadies you. It's not about losing control. It's about gaining strength, multiplying your fire. So, reach out. Find your people, those who see your stars and lift you toward them. Build your dream team, not for revenge, but for legacy. Because when you do, you'll stand taller than you ever imagined. Anchored, unbreakable, home. Number 6, innovation and adaptation. Staying ahead of the curve. There was a time when I thought I had it all figured out. 20 years in, scripts flowing, views climbing. I was a river in full current, carving my path through the industry. But then, the landscape shifted. Digital platforms rose like mountains, casting shadows over the valleys I'd known. Suddenly, my river was slowing, the banks closing in. I felt it a creeping sense of exile, as if the world was moving on without me. I remember sitting at my desk, staring at a blank screen, the cursor blinking like a taunt. My old methods, my trusted tools, felt like anchors dragging me down. The pain wasn't just professional, it was personal. I'd tied my identity to a way of being that was fading. Rejection letters piled up, not from others, but from the industry itself, whispering, "You're obsolete." But in that silence, a truth began to root itself in me. The hurt wasn't from the change, it was from my resistance to it. I was clinging to a riverbed that was drying up when I needed to let the current carry me to new waters. Innovation wasn't a betrayal of my craft, it was its evolution. Adaptation wasn't surrender, it was strength. So, I resolved to grow. I dug deep, like roots seeking new soil. I learned to write for digital, to tell stories in snippets, to connect through screens. It was humbling, messy, but with each step, I felt my worth returning, not as it was, but stronger, more resilient. Now, I stand not as a relic of the past, but as a testament to the power of change. I didn't adapt to prove them wrong. I adapted to honor my own path. And that's the quiet triumph knowing I didn't break. I bent and grew. You, too, are here because the world is shifting beneath your feet. Maybe your business feels like a river losing its flow, or your dreams like stars slipping from the sky. But hear this, you weren't meant to drift. You were born to anchor, to root yourself in new ground, to rise with the strength of a mountain. Innovation isn't a buzzword, it's your lifeline. Adaptation isn't a choice, it's your birthright. You adapt, you grow. You adapt, you thrive. Change isn't the enemy. Fear is. So, let's embrace the unknown, not with trembling hands, but with the steady heart of a builder. So, here's your invitation, own your story. Innovate with courage, adapt with grace, build something that lasts, not by standing still, but by flowing with the current, rooted in your truth. Because when you do, you'll see that the curve ahead isn't a threat, it's your path home. Number 7, risk management. Safeguarding your business. I remember the day it all fell apart. My business, my baby, was thriving, or so I thought. I'd poured my heart into it, every ounce of energy, every late night. But then, a key client pulled out, and like a house of cards, everything collapsed. I was blindsided, drowning in debt and doubt. The pain wasn't just financial, it was personal. I felt like I'd lost myself, my identity tied to something that was now ash. I was a river without banks, spilling over, lost. But in that darkness, a truth took root. I hadn't failed because I wasn't good enough. I'd failed because I hadn't prepared for the storm. Risk wasn't the enemy, ignorance was. That realization was my turning point. I resolved to rebuild, not just my business, but my approach. I started small, mapping out every possible pitfall, from cash flow dips to market shifts. I didn't just plan for success, I planned for survival. It wasn't glamorous, but it was grounding. Each contingency was a brick, each backup plan a root sinking deeper. When I launched again, I wasn't just hoping for the best, I was ready for the worst. And when challenges came, as they always do, I didn't break, I bent, I adapted, I stood firm. That's the quiet triumph of risk management. It's not about avoiding pain, but about building strength to weather it. Now, as I share this with you, it's not to scare you, but to steady you. You're here because you've felt that fracture, that fear of the unknown. But hear this, you weren't meant to drift through uncertainty. You were born to anchor, to root yourself in foresight and resilience. Risk management isn't a shield against failure. It's the foundation that lets you rise, again and again. So, let's build that foundation together, brick by brick, not for perfection, but for purpose. Because when you do, you'll find that the storms don't define you, they refine you. And that's a legacy worth building. Number 8, avoiding pitfalls. Common mistakes and how to dodge them. I remember the night I almost walked away. My business, my dream, was crumbling. I'd poured everything into it, sleepless nights, borrowed money, my heart on a platter. But one mistake snowballed into another. I'd trusted the wrong partner, ignored the numbers, chased shiny ideas instead of steady ground. The fracture was brutal. I felt like a river that had burst its banks, flooding everything I'd built, leaving only mud and regret. I sat alone in the dark, the weight of failure pressing down, my identity slipping through my fingers like water. I wasn't just losing a business, I was losing myself. The world felt cold, and I was adrift. But in that silence, a truth took root. The hurt wasn't the end, it was the beginning. I'd been so afraid of mistakes that I'd let them define me. Yet, every misstep was a map, not a dead end. I wasn't broken, I was breaking ground. So, I resolved to rebuild, not by erasing my failures, but by learning from them. I started small, like a seed finding soil. I listened to mentors, to the numbers, to the quiet voice inside that knew the way. I let go of pride, embraced the mess, and step by step, I found my footing. My business didn't just recover, it grew deeper roots, stronger than before. That's the quiet pride of knowing you didn't break, you bent. You learned, you rose. You're here because you've felt that fracture too. Maybe you've trusted the wrong person, chased the wrong dream, or watched your plans unravel. But hear this, mistakes aren't your enemy. Fear is. They didn't reject you because you failed. They rejected you because you dared to try. And that's your strength. You're not a river meant to drift, you're a mountain, built to stand tall. So, let's turn those pitfalls into stepping stones. Own your story, learn from the cracks, and build something lasting. Not for applause, but for the legacy of knowing you didn't break. You rose. And that's a foundation no storm can shake. Number 9, sustainable growth building, a business that lasts. I remember the day my first business took off. It was like a rocket, shooting up so fast I could barely keep up. Orders flooded in, my inbox overflowed, and I felt like I was on top of the world, but then, just as quickly, it all came crashing down. A supplier bailed, costs spiraled, and customers vanished. I was left standing in the wreckage, my dream in ruins. The pain cut deep. I'd tied my worth to that fleeting success. And when it crumbled, so did I. I felt like a river that had burst its banks, flooding everything in sight but leaving nothing behind. I was adrift, lost in the chaos of my own making. But in the quiet that followed, a truth began to take root. I hadn't failed because I wasn't good enough. I'd failed because I hadn't built to last. I'd chased the rush of rapid growth, ignoring the need for strong foundations. Sustainable growth isn't about speed, it's about strength. It's not a sprint to the stars, but a steady climb up the mountain. So, I resolved to rebuild, not for quick wins, but for lasting impact. I started small, nurturing my business like a gardener tends to a tree, ensuring its roots ran deep before it reached for the sky. Step by step, I focused on what mattered: quality over quantity, relationships over transactions, purpose over profit. It wasn't glamorous, but it was grounding. And over time, my business didn't just grow, it thrived, steady and unshakable. That's the quiet triumph of sustainable growth, knowing you've built something that can weather any storm. You weren't meant to drift with the current of quick success. You were born to anchor, to build roots that run deep. So, if you've ever felt the sting of a dream that crumbled too soon, remember you have the strength to build again, not for the fleeting applause, but for the legacy that lasts. Let's grow together, steady and strong. Number 10. Conclusion, key takeaways, and your next steps. There was a time when I stood at the edge of everything I'd built, watching it crumble. My business, my dream, was slipping through my fingers like sand. I'd poured my heart into it, but the weight of rejection, the sting of failure, left me fractured, adrift like a river without banks, lost in the current of my own doubts. I remember sitting alone in the dark, the silence pressing in, my identity unraveling with every breath. But in that stillness, a truth took root. I wasn't broken. I was breaking ground. The pain wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And so, I resolved to rebuild, not for applause or revenge, but for the quiet pride of knowing I didn't break. Step by step, I anchored myself, found my path, and rose. You've walked this journey with me, from the fracture of loss to the triumph of reclaiming your strength. You've seen how rejection isn't a verdict, it's a redirection. They didn't cast you aside because you failed. They cast you aside because you dared to rise. And in daring, you've built something real, a business plan that's your compass. Finances that are your lifeline, a team that's your foundation, and innovation that's your North Star. You've learned to manage risks, not as threats, but as stepping stones, to grow sustainably, not for speed, but for strength. You've turned pitfalls into purpose. And now, you stand here, not just surviving, but thriving. But this isn't the end, it's your beginning. You are no longer a river adrift. You are a mountain, anchored and unshakable. Your roots run deep, your path is clear, and the stars are yours to claim. Success isn't a trophy on a shelf. It's the quiet pride in your chest when you look back and see how far you've come. It's the home you've built within yourself, brick by brick, truth by truth. And now, it's time to take that strength and build something lasting, not for the world's approval, but for the legacy that will echo through time. So, here's your invitation: own your story. Step forward with quiet confidence and let your journey be your truth. You've built this, step by step. You'll keep building, brick by brick. The road ahead isn't without storms, but you are the mountain, rooted and resilient. Let's rise together, not to prove them wrong, but to prove yourself right. Because you were never meant to drift, you were born to anchor, to stand tall, and to leave a mark that lasts.